The night I realized how cold Christmas could feel had nothing to do with the weather. It started with the sound of laughter drifting through the front door, warm and loud, while I stood outside holding a plate of food that was already going cold. The porch light flickered above me, casting weak shadows on the wooden steps, and I remember thinking how strange it was that a house full of family could make someone feel so alone. That was the Christmas my mom told me I had to eat dinner on the porch. And at the time, I had no idea that a single lottery ticket worth $100 million was about to turn everything upside down. I wasn't always the outsider in my own family. Growing up, Christmas used to be my favorite time of year. The house would smell like baked chicken, spices, and fresh bread. Music played softly in the background, and we'd all crowd around the table, arguing over who got the last roll. But as I got older, things changed. My mom changed. Or maybe the way she looked at me did. Every mistake I made, every choice she didn't like, seemed to stack up until I was no longer the child she was proud of, but the one she tolerated. That Christmas evening, I arrived a little later than planned. Work had run late, and traffic was terrible. I still remember sitting in my car for a moment before going inside, staring at the small gift I had managed to buy, feeling nervous for reasons I couldn't explain. I told myself to shake it off. It was Christmas. Family was family. No matter what had happened before, tonight was supposed to be different. When I walked in, the living room was full. Relatives I hadn't seen in months were laughing, glasses clinking, the TV playing softly in the background. My mom glanced at me, her smile fading just a little, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. She didn't say hello.
She didn't ask how I was.
Instead, she looked at the clock and sighed. That small moment told me everything I needed to know, but I still wasn't prepared for what came next. Dinner was served not long after. Everyone took their seats around the table, plates piled high. I stood there awkwardly, waiting for my place, when my mom cleared her throat. She told me, calmly but firmly, that there wasn't space for me at the table. At first, I thought she was joking. I even laughed a little, hoping someone else would laugh too. No one did. Then she said it again, louder this time, pointing toward the front door. She told me I could eat on the porch. The room went quiet in that uncomfortable way where everyone hears everything but pretends they don't. My face burned with embarrassment. I wanted to argue, to ask her why, to remind her that I was her child. But something about the way she looked at me stopped the words in my throat. So I picked up a plate, walked outside, and closed the door behind me. The porch was colder than I expected. I sat on the steps, balancing the plate on my knees, listening to the muffled sounds of my family inside. Every laugh felt like a reminder that I didn't belong in there. I took a bite of food, but it tasted like nothing. My mind kept replaying my mom's words, trying to understand how things had reached this point. Was I really that disappointing? Had I done something so unforgivable that I deserved this kind of treatment? As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the local store where I sometimes stopped on my way home from work. Earlier that day, on a whim, I had bought a lottery ticket. I almost laughed at the thought of it now. $100 million. The odds were ridiculous. It was nothing more than a distraction, a tiny spark of hope in an otherwise exhausting routine. I hadn't even checked the numbers yet. I stared at the message on my screen, debating whether to open it. Part of me didn't care. What difference would it make? Even if I won something small, it wouldn't change how I felt sitting alone on that porch. Still, my hands were shaking slightly as I unlocked my phone. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was something else. Inside the house, I heard my mom's voice rise above the others. She was telling a story, probably about how hard she'd worked, how much she'd sacrificed. I'd heard those stories my whole life. I wondered if she ever realized how small they made me feel. I wondered if she cared. The porch light buzzed softly overhead, and for a moment, everything felt frozen in time, like the universe was holding its breath. I didn't check the ticket right away. Instead, I looked up at the dark sky, thinking about how quickly life can push you to the edges. One minute, you're part of something. The next, you're eating Christmas dinner alone, questioning your worth. I told myself that this was just one night, that things would get better eventually. I just didn't know how. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reminder to check the lottery results before midnight. My heart started to race, slow at first, then faster. I told myself not to get my hopes up. People like me didn't win things like that. But as I held the phone in my hands, sitting on that cold porch, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. I took a deep breath, glanced once more at the closed front door, and wondered how differently everyone inside would look at me if my life suddenly changed. Would my mom still see me the same way? Would this night still matter if I wasn't the person she thought I was? With my thumb hovering over the screen, I realized that no matter what those numbers said, nothing would ever be the same again. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to tap it just yet. Instead, I slid the phone back into my pocket like it might burn me if I looked too closely. I needed a second to breathe, to steady my thoughts. The cold air filled my lungs, sharp and clean, and I let it out slowly. Inside, the laughter grew louder, the clink of silverware against plates reminding me that dinner was still going on without me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I thought back to how things used to be between my mom and me. When I was younger, she was strict but fair, always telling me to work hard and never rely on luck. She believed in effort, discipline, and doing things the right way. Somewhere along the line, she decided I wasn't doing any of that. Dropping out of college, bouncing between jobs, struggling to find my footing, it all became proof, in her eyes, that I had failed. Every family gathering after that felt like a test. I was destined to fail again. That night on the porch wasn't the first time she'd embarrassed me, but it was the worst. There was something final about it, like she wanted everyone to see where she thought I belonged. I wondered if the rest of the family agreed with her, or if they were just too uncomfortable to speak up.
No one had come outside to check on me.
No one had sent a text asking if I was okay. That silence was loud. I picked at the food on my plate, more out of habit than hunger. Each bite felt heavy, like it carried all the unspoken words between my mom and me. I kept replaying the moment she pointed toward the door. The way her eyes didn't waver. The way she didn't hesitate. It made me question everything, my choices, my worth, even my place in this family. The lottery ticket pressed against my leg in my pocket, a small rectangle of paper that suddenly felt important. Earlier that day, I'd almost skipped buying it. I was tired, broke, and just wanted to get home. But something had made me stop at the counter. The cashier had joked about Christmas miracles, and I'd smiled politely, not believing a word of it. Now, sitting alone in the dark, that joke echoed in my mind. I pulled the ticket out and stared at it under the porch light. The numbers meant nothing to me yet, just ink on paper. I thought about my mom's voice, always telling me that luck was for lazy people, that money earned easily was money wasted. If she knew I was even thinking about a lottery win, she'd probably roll her eyes and call it another example of my bad decisions. Inside the house, someone turned the music up. A familiar Christmas song drifted through the walls, cheerful and bright, completely out of place with how I felt. I wondered what it would be like to walk back in there, to sit at the table like nothing had happened. But pride and hurt kept me rooted to the porch. I wasn't ready to face them, especially not her. My phone buzzed again, this time a group message from a cousin wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. I stared at the screen, my name listed alongside everyone else's, and felt a strange disconnect. Technically, I was included. Emotionally, I was worlds away. I typed a quick, Merry Christmas back, then turned the phone face down, not wanting to see any replies. As the night went on, the cold crept deeper into my bones. I wrapped my arms around myself, thinking about all the small moments that had led to this bigger one. The arguments, the disappointment, the constant feeling of never being enough. I wondered if my mom remembered the nights she'd stayed up helping me with homework, telling me I could be anything. Or if that version of me was gone forever in her mind. The ticket felt heavier now, like it was carrying a question I wasn't ready to answer. What would I do if something unexpected happened? Would money change how my family treated me, or would it just reveal things that were already there? I didn't want to believe that love could be so easily bought or withheld, but sitting on that porch, it was hard not to wonder. I glanced back at the door again, half expecting it to open. Maybe my mom would come out, apologize, tell me to come inside. Maybe someone would finally notice I was gone. The door stayed closed. The laughter continued. That told me more than words ever could. I decided to walk down the steps and pace the small front yard, trying to get my blood moving. The grass crunched softly under my shoes, and I looked up at the windows glowing warmly against the dark. It felt like staring into another world, one where I wasn't welcome. The thought stung, but it also hardened something inside me. A quiet resolve I didn't fully understand yet. I stopped near the sidewalk and finally pulled my phone out again. The app with the lottery results was right there, waiting. I could almost hear my heart beating in my ears. Still, I hesitated. Checking those numbers felt like crossing a line, like once I knew, there would be no going back. Whatever the result, it would change how I saw this night. I slipped the ticket back into my pocket without looking. Not yet. I told myself I needed more time, more space to think. I needed to understand how I felt before adding anything else to the mix. Winning or losing didn't matter as much as what this moment was teaching me about myself and my family. As I walked back toward the porch, snowflakes began to fall lightly, catching in my hair and on my jacket. They melted almost as soon as they landed, leaving behind a chill and a strange calm. Christmas had always been about hope, about believing in something better. Sitting there, alone again, I wondered if hope was something you had to protect, even when the people closest to you made it hard. I sat back down, pulled my jacket tighter, and stared into the darkness beyond the porch light. Inside, the party went on. Outside, I waited, caught between what my life had been and what it might become. The ticket rested quietly in my pocket, the numbers still a mystery, and the night stretched on, full of questions that had no answers yet. The longer I sat there, the more memories crept in, uninvited and heavy. I thought about the last real conversation my mom and I had weeks before Christmas, when she told me I needed to get my life together. Her words weren't shouted. That almost made them worse. They were calm, measured, like a final judgment she'd already made in her mind. I remembered nodding, pretending I agreed, pretending it didn't hurt. But it had stayed with me, echoing in moments like this. From inside the house, I could hear snippets of conversation through the walls. Someone mentioned work promotions, someone else talked about vacation plans. Normal things. Comfortable things. I wondered if my name came up when I wasn't around. If my mom used me as an example of what not to do.
The thought tightened my chest.
It wasn't just about being sent to the porch. It was about feeling erased, like I didn't quite count anymore. I checked my phone again, not for the lottery this time, but for the time. It was getting late. Part of me considered just leaving, driving away into the night, and putting this whole Christmas behind me. But another part of me stayed. Maybe I wanted to see how far this would go. Maybe I was waiting for something to break the tension, for someone to finally acknowledge what was happening. The porch creaked softly as I shifted my weight. That sound reminded me of my dad, who had left when I was younger. He used to sit on these same steps, drinking coffee in the early mornings before work. He'd tell me stories about his childhood, about how he always felt like the odd one out in his own family too. I hadn't thought about that in years. I wondered what he'd say if he saw me now. Would he laugh it off? Would he be angry for me? Or would he tell me this was just how families were sometimes? A cousin finally stepped outside, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, her eyes widened slightly, like she'd walked in on something private. She hesitated, then offered a quick, awkward smile before turning away to continue her call. She didn't ask why I was out there. She didn't invite me back inside. When she went back in, the door closed softly, but it still felt like a slam. That small interaction somehow made things worse. It confirmed what I'd already felt all night, that everyone knew, and no one wanted to get involved. It was easier to let my mom have her way than to rock the boat. I wondered how often that happened in families, how many people sat quietly on their own porches, literal or not, because speaking up felt too risky. The lottery ticket seemed to pulse in my pocket, as if reminding me it existed. I thought about money and how it changed things. I'd seen it before, even in small ways. People treated you differently when you paid the bill, when you helped out financially, when you weren't the one always struggling. My mom valued independence above everything else. She hated the idea of anyone depending on her. In her mind, needing help was the same as failing. I asked myself an uncomfortable question. If I suddenly wasn't struggling anymore, would she respect me again? Or would she find another reason to keep her distance? The idea scared me because it meant that maybe this wasn't just about money or success. Maybe it was about control. About who held the power in our relationship. Inside, the music changed to something slower. Plates were being cleared, chairs scraping against the floor. Dinner was ending. I realized that soon, dessert would be served. Another moment I wouldn't be part of. The thought made me feel small, like a kid being punished without fully understanding why. I stood up again, my legs stiff from the cold, and walked toward the edge of the porch. I thought about knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. I imagined the looks I'd get, the forced smiles, the tension that would follow me into the room. I wasn't sure I could handle that either. So I stayed where I was, caught between wanting to belong and wanting to protect what little pride I had left. My phone buzzed once more, this time from a friend who knew I was supposed to be with family tonight. She asked how Christmas was going. I stared at the message for a long time before replying with a simple, "It's okay." It was a lie, but it was easier than explaining the truth. Sometimes, the truth felt too heavy to share. As the cold deepened, my thoughts wandered to the future. I pictured myself a year from now, maybe in a different place, maybe still struggling, maybe finally stable. I wondered if my mom would ever see me differently, or if this version of me was all she'd ever allow herself to see. The idea that I might never be enough for her settled over me like another layer of frost. I reached into my pocket and touched the edge of the ticket again, just to remind myself it was real. The irony wasn't lost on me. All my life, I'd been told to rely on hard work, not luck. And yet here I was, clinging to the possibility of a random draw to change everything. It felt wrong and hopeful at the same time. Through the window, I saw my mom stand up from her chair. She looked tired, older than I remembered, her movements slower. For a brief moment, something softened in my chest. I wondered if she was hurting too, if she even realized what she'd done to me tonight. Or if, in her mind, this was just another lesson she thought I needed to learn. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I lost sight of her. That unfinished moment stayed with me, hanging in the air. I didn't know what I wanted from her anymore, an apology, understanding, or just acknowledgement. All I knew was that this distance between us felt wider than ever. I sat back down and stared at my phone, the lottery app still unopened. Midnight was getting closer. The numbers would be final soon, whether I checked them or not. My life, my family, my sense of self all felt balanced on a thin edge. I didn't know which way things would fall, only that whatever happened next would force me to face truths I'd been avoiding for a long time. The air felt heavier as midnight crept closer, like the night itself was leaning in to watch what would happen next. My fingers were numb, but I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from the nerves twisting inside me. Every few minutes, I glanced at my phone, then looked away again, afraid of what I might see. The lottery ticket in my pocket felt like a secret I wasn't ready to face, yet it was impossible to ignore. Inside the house, the mood shifted. I could hear voices growing louder, looser, as drinks were poured and stories were repeated. Laughter burst out in waves, followed by long stretches of noise that blurred together. It felt like time was moving faster in there, while out on the porch, each second dragged on. I wondered if my mom had already forgotten I was outside, or if she was aware of me in the same distant way you're aware of something you don't want to deal with. I thought about standing up and leaving for good. There was nothing stopping me. I could walk to my car, drive away, and let this night end without another word. But some part of me stayed rooted to that spot, like I needed to see this through, no matter how uncomfortable it became. It felt like one of those moments in life where turning away would haunt you more than facing whatever came next. The door opened suddenly, and for a split second, my heart jumped. A wave of warm air spilled out, carrying the smell of dessert and coffee. My mom stepped onto the porch, her face unreadable. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and stared out into the yard. The silence between us stretched, thick and awkward. "You're still out here," she finally said, not unkindly but not warmly either. I nodded, unsure what to say. 1,000 words crowded my mind, but none of them felt safe enough to let out. I waited for her to say more, to explain, to apologize, or even to scold me again. She didn't. She just stood there, as if weighing something in her thoughts. "For dessert," she added after a moment, gesturing vaguely toward the door. It wasn't an invitation so much as a statement. Before I could respond, she turned and went back inside, leaving the door open just long enough for me to hear someone ask where she'd been. Then it closed again. That brief exchange rattled me more than I expected. It wasn't kindness, but it wasn't cruelty either. It was something in between, and that uncertainty made my chest tighten. I wondered if she felt guilty or if she simply didn't care enough to push the issue further. The idea that she might see this as normal hurt in a way I couldn't easily explain. I stayed where I was even with the door closed again. Dessert or not, the damage was already done. My phone vibrated in my hand, the screen lighting up with a notification from the lottery app. The results were officially in. My pulse raced, so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was it. The moment I'd been avoiding all night. I stood up, pacing the length of the porch, then back again. My mind raced ahead, imagining different outcomes, different futures. In one version, nothing changed. I'd check the numbers, lose, and this night would remain exactly what it was: painful, quiet, and unresolved. In another version, something unimaginable happened, something that would force everyone inside that house to see me differently. The thought of that second possibility scared me almost as much as it excited me. I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of shift, for the way it might reshape every relationship in my life, especially the one with my mom. If the balance of power changed, what would that reveal about us? Would it heal anything or just expose deeper cracks? I leaned against the porch railing and looked up at the sky again. The snow had stopped, leaving the night eerily still. It felt like the world was holding its breath with me. I thought about all the times I'd wished for a sign that things could get better, that my efforts weren't meaningless. I never imagined that sign might come in the form of a few printed numbers on a piece of paper. Inside, the laughter surged again, louder than before. Someone must have told a joke. I pictured my mom smiling, relaxed among the others. I wondered if she'd ever sit with me like that again, without judgment, without disappointment clouding her face. The question lingered, unanswered. I pulled the ticket out of my pocket and smoothed it between my fingers. The paper was slightly crumpled now, worn from being handled so much. I lined it up next to my phone, my hands trembling despite my effort to stay calm. I hadn't checked a single number yet. The suspense was unbearable, but part of me wanted to freeze this moment, to stay right here where anything was still possible. Just then, my phone rang. The sound cut through the night, sharp and unexpected. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding even harder when I saw who it was. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, my voice unsteady as I said hello. On the other end, there was a brief pause, followed by a calm, professional voice asking to confirm my name. The porch suddenly felt smaller, the walls of the house closing in around me. My grip tightened on the phone as the voice continued, explaining who they were and why they were calling. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, trying not to jump to conclusions. Inside, I could hear the muffled sounds of my family, completely unaware that something big was unfolding just steps away. I swallowed hard, listening as the caller spoke, every word raising the tension another notch. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. Whatever this call meant, I knew one thing for sure. After tonight, after this moment, nothing in my life would ever feel the same again. The voice on the phone asked me to verify my date of birth and the city where I bought the ticket. My mouth went dry. I answered slowly, carefully, afraid that one wrong word might make the call disappear. The night around me felt unreal, like I was standing outside my own life, watching it bend in a new direction. When the caller paused again, my heart hammered so loudly, I was sure they could hear it. Before they could continue, the front door opened behind me. This time, it didn't close right away. I could feel someone standing there, close enough that the warmth from inside brushed against my back. I turned slightly and saw my mom watching me, her eyes narrowed with confusion and something else I couldn't quite name.
Concern, maybe.
Or suspicion. She glanced at the phone in my hand, then back at my face. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice sharp, cutting through the calm tone on the other end of the call. I covered the speaker without thinking, my instincts kicking in. "I'll be right back," I said into the phone, my voice barely above a whisper. The caller agreed, reminding me they'd stay on the line. I lowered the phone and looked at my mom, suddenly feeling like a kid caught doing something wrong. "It's work," I lied, and hated myself for it instantly. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. Work never called this late, and she knew it. She stepped fully onto the porch now, crossing her arms the way she did when she was bracing for an argument. "You've been out here a long time," she said. "People are asking questions." That stung. Not because people were asking, but because it took that long for anyone to notice. I nodded, unsure how to explain the swirl of emotions inside me. The phone buzzed softly in my hand, reminding me that this moment couldn't be paused forever. "I need a minute," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Please." She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to read something written too faintly. Finally, she sighed and stepped back toward the door. "Don't be dramatic," she muttered, a familiar phrase that always made me feel smaller. Then she went inside, leaving the door cracked open. I turned away from the house, my hands shaking as I brought the phone back to my ear. The caller resumed, explaining that there had been a match on a ticket sold in my area. They stressed that nothing was official yet, that procedures had to be followed. Their words were careful, measured, but each one landed like a spark. My mind raced ahead, imagining headlines, bank accounts, conversations that had never seemed possible before. But beneath the excitement, a new fear took hold. What if this wasn't just about money? What if this ticket became a line drawn between me and my family, especially my mom? The idea that something meant to bring relief could also bring more distance made my stomach twist. As the caller spoke, I noticed movement inside the house through the window. My mom was standing just inside, pretending to be busy while clearly listening. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I looked away, guilt and defiance mixing in my chest. For the first time in a long while, I had something that felt like mine alone, and I wasn't ready to share it. The caller asked me not to discuss the ticket with anyone yet, emphasizing privacy and security. I agreed quickly, almost desperately. The timing of that advice felt eerie, like the universe was warning me to be careful. When the call ended, the porch felt impossibly quiet, the weight of everything pressing down on me at once. I slipped the phone into my pocket just as the door opened again. My mom stepped out, her expression softer now but still guarded. "Is everything okay?" she asked, and for once, it didn't sound like an accusation. I hesitated. The truth sat right on my tongue, heavy and tempting. I thought about how she'd treated me tonight, how small and invisible I'd felt. I thought about the ticket, the call, the possibilities. Telling her now could change everything, but not necessarily in a good way. "Yeah," I said finally. "I just needed some air." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that answer away for later. "Well," she said, "we're cutting the cake."
Cake.
Such a simple word for a moment that suddenly felt loaded. She turned to go back inside, then paused. "You can come in," she added, not meeting my eyes. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't warmth. But it was something. I stood there, torn. Going inside meant sitting at that table, pretending nothing had happened, pretending I wasn't carrying a secret that could blow everything apart. Staying outside meant holding onto this moment of clarity, this strange, fragile sense of control. As I followed her back toward the door, my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from a number I didn't recognize, mentioning verification and next steps.
My heart jumped.
I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the weight of it like a ticking clock. Inside, my family looked up as we entered, their faces a mix of curiosity and forced cheer. No one asked where I'd been. No one apologized. I took an empty seat, the noise and warmth closing in around me. My mom sat across from me, cutting the cake with careful precision. As she handed out slices, her eyes flicked toward me, then away. In that small gesture, I saw the beginning of something shifting, though I couldn't tell what shape it would take. The secret in my pocket felt heavier than ever, and I realized that the real conflict wasn't just about the lottery or the money anymore. It was about what happens when the person you've been underestimated by suddenly holds all the cards. I sat there with the plate of cake in front of me, barely tasting it, my heart still racing from the call. The room felt louder than before, every sound sharp and close. My mom talked to my aunt about something small and ordinary, but I noticed how her eyes kept drifting back to me. Not angry, not cold, curious. Like she sensed a shift but didn't know where it came from. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. This time, I didn't ignore it. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. Conversations paused for just a second, heads turning toward me. I muttered something about taking a call and walked toward the hallway, my legs feeling unsteady. Behind me, I heard my mom sigh, the familiar sound of disapproval following me like a shadow. I stepped into the quiet of the hallway and answered. The same calm voice came through the line, more formal now. They confirmed the numbers. All of them. My ticket wasn't just a match. It was the match. $100 million. The words landed hard, knocking the air out of my lungs. I leaned against the wall to steady myself, my vision blurring as my mind tried to catch up. They talked about next steps, lawyers, secure meetings, how my name wouldn't be public yet if I didn't want it to be. I nodded and agreed to everything, even though they couldn't see me. When the call ended, the house felt different, like I was standing in it as a different person. Nothing around me had changed, but everything had. I slid down onto the small bench by the wall, my hands shaking. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, half disbelief, half relief. The same porch where I'd felt invisible hours ago was just a few steps away, and now my life had taken a turn I never could have imagined. I thought about my mom's words, about being told to eat outside, about being treated like I didn't belong. The irony was almost too much. When I walked back into the dining room, the noise faded again. This time, I didn't sit down. I stood there, looking at the faces around the table. My mom noticed right away. She put the knife down and frowned. "What is it now?" she asked, her tone tired but alert. I took a deep breath. "I need to say something," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Everyone grew quiet, forks paused midair. I looked at my mom first. "Earlier tonight, when you told me to eat on the porch, that hurt. More than you know." Her face tightened, and for a moment I thought she'd snap back, defend herself like she always did. But she didn't. She just watched me, waiting. "I didn't come here to fight," I continued. "I came because you're my family, even when it doesn't feel like it." The room was silent enough that I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ticket. A few people leaned forward, confused. My mom's eyes dropped to the paper, then lifted back to my face. "I bought a lottery ticket today," I said. "I just got a call." Her expression shifted, disbelief flickering across her features. "And?" she asked cautiously. "And I won," I said simply. "All of it." For a split second, no one reacted. Then the room exploded with gasps, voices overlapping, chairs scraping back. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin laughed out loud, thinking it was a joke. My mom didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her face draining of color. "It's true," I added quietly. 100 million. The energy in the room changed instantly. People looked at me differently, like they were seeing me for the first time. Questions flew at me, rapid and overwhelming. When did I buy it? Was I serious? What was I going to do? I raised my hand, needing them to stop. My eyes went back to my mom. "This doesn't erase tonight," I said. "And it doesn't change how I felt sitting out there alone." She swallowed hard. The room fell quiet again, All eyes on her now. Slowly, she stood up. I didn't mean to humiliate you, she said, her voice low. I thought you needed a lesson. A lesson in what? I asked gently. That I don't belong? Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. I was scared, she admitted, surprising everyone, including me. Scared you'd never be okay. That I'd failed you. The words hit me harder than her earlier cruelty ever had. For the first time, I saw her not as the judge I'd always feared, but as someone carrying her own quiet failures. The room stayed silent, giving us space. I don't need your lessons, I said softly. I needed your support. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded once, like she finally understood something she'd been avoiding for years. I'm sorry, she said. The word hung in the air, fragile but real. Relief washed through me, warm and unexpected. It felt like a door opening that I'd assumed was permanently locked. Around us, the family slowly relaxed, the tension easing into murmurs and soft smiles. It felt like the climax of a long, painful chapter finally finding its end. Then my phone buzzed again. I glanced down, expecting another message about the lottery process. Instead, it was from a number I recognized instantly. My dad. A name I hadn't seen on my screen in years. The message was short. I heard. We need to talk. My heart skipped. I looked up at my mom, who was still standing across from me, wiping at her eyes. She noticed my expression change. What is it? She asked. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the weight of the moment settling in. Winning the lottery had brought one truth into the open, but it had also unlocked another door I hadn't been prepared to face. Family history, old wounds, new expectations. I said slowly, this is just the beginning. The room buzzed again with conversation, plans, excitement. But beneath it all, a new tension hummed quietly, waiting. The money had changed everything, but not in the way I expected. And as I stood there, surrounded by people who suddenly saw my worth, I realized the final test wouldn't be about what I gained, but what it would cost me to hold on to who I really was. The noise in the room slowly settled into something calmer, like a storm passing. People went back to their conversations, though they kept glancing at me in a way that felt new and strange. I excused myself quietly and stepped back onto the porch, needing space to think. The cold air hit my face again, but this time it didn't feel cruel. It felt grounding. This porch, the same place where I'd felt humiliated just hours earlier, now felt like a place where everything had shifted. I took out my phone and opened the message from my dad. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since he left and chose distance over effort. For a long time, I'd carried anger toward him, then disappointment, and finally silence. His message was simple, but it carried weight. I replied just as simply, telling him we could talk, but not tonight. I wasn't ready to open every door at once. He respected that, sending back a short message saying he understood. That alone felt like a small kind of closure. When I went back inside, my mom was sitting at the table alone, the others busy in the living room. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. Sit, she said quietly. I did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It felt honest. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't welcome, she said finally. I didn't handle things right. Tonight showed me that. I nodded. I don't need perfection, I said. I just need respect. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. It was a small gesture, but it carried years of unspoken emotion. You have it, she said. From now on. The days that followed moved fast, but not in the chaotic way I'd feared. There were meetings, paperwork, and long conversations with professionals who explained what winning the lottery really meant. I learned quickly that money didn't magically solve everything. It came with decisions, boundaries, and responsibility. But it also came with freedom. Freedom to breathe. Freedom to choose. My family adjusted too. Some relatives were suddenly very interested in my life, eager to reconnect. I paid attention to who showed genuine care and who showed up with expectations. It was eye-opening. I stayed polite, but I stayed firm. Winning didn't mean I owed anyone anything. My relationship with my mom changed in ways I hadn't expected. We started talking more, really talking, about her fears, about my struggles, about all the years we'd misunderstood each other. She admitted that watching me struggle scared her more than she knew how to express, and she'd let that fear turn into control. I told her how much her words had hurt me, especially that Christmas night. We didn't erase the past, but we finally faced it. One afternoon, weeks later, I sat with her on the porch. The same porch. The sunlight warmed the wooden steps, and everything felt lighter. "Funny how life works," she said, shaking her head. "One night can change everything." "It wasn't just the money," I replied. "It was being pushed outside. It forced me to see things clearly." She nodded, tears in her eyes again. But this time she smiled. "I'm glad you didn't walk away," she said. "So am I answered honestly. I did eventually meet with my dad. We sat in a quiet cafe, both older, both cautious. We talked about the past, about why he left, about the things we couldn't change. It wasn't a miracle reunion, but it was real. We agreed to take things slow. That was enough for me. As time passed, I used my lottery winnings carefully. I paid off debts, invested wisely, and made sure I'd never feel trapped by money again. But the most important thing I gained wasn't financial security. It was self-respect. I learned that my worth had never been tied to my bank account, even if others only noticed it once the numbers changed. Every Christmas after that felt different. Quieter, warmer. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. And every time I stepped onto the porch, I remembered that night, not with pain, but with clarity. Sometimes, life pushes you outside to show you who you really are. And sometimes, the greatest win isn't the lottery ticket in your pocket, but the strength you discover when you finally stop accepting less than you deserve.